welcome back. My name is Priscilla Martinez, founder of Regroop.org. Today we're going to be talking about how to set boundaries with your boss. Let's talk about some common scenarios where it may be important for you to set your boundaries. The first scenario is the guilt trip. So here's how I would suggest that you handle the guilt trip. The guilt trip happens because you feel that you are supposed to do the thing that you're being asked to do. You feel guilty for saying no. You somehow feel that it speaks on you and your character and even your work. You need to let that go. You saying no is because there are other things that also have to be taken care of that are also important, and it has nothing to do with your value and how you perceive the actual work that's being asked of you. Now, if it does, and you in fact just don't feel like doing whatever you're being asked to do, then you need to own that. You can't say, I don't want to do it, and I also feel guilty about it. Either you want to do it or you don't. If you're not doing what you were being asked to do because you have other priorities or responsibilities, that's fine. Those are your priorities and your responsibilities. And so it's really important that you keep in mind that these things are also important to me, not just work. And then that way you can kind of let go of that guilt a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind is that just because you're feeling guilty doesn't mean that your boss is actually trying to guilt you into anything. So when you approach them to have a conversation, to let them know you can't follow through on the work that they've given you, you just need to keep in mind that maybe they're not trying to guilt you, and that helps you minimize any resentment that might fester because you think that they're trying to do something intentionally to make you feel badly. So you want to be saying no in a concise way without providing too many details for them. When you give them the opportunity to really understand the reasons why you're not able to do the tasks or work they're asking you to do, you're putting them in a position where, or rather, you're putting yourself in the position where you are now seeing whether or not they consider your feelings justified, right? Their reaction may not be direct, it just may be a subtlety in their expression that you know that they're judging your feelings. And now you feel even more guilty for wanting to go do the thing you need to take care of. And so I would say keep it short and sweet. No, I'm not able to do this. And this is where I would very much encourage you to suggest an alternative. I'm not able to do this today, but maybe I can do this tomorrow. Could this wait until Friday? Could so-and-so maybe help me take on this project or take on this task? Now, suggesting an alternative is really important because it lets them know that you're not trying to leave them high and dry. You're really thinking about, okay, this is important. You're seeing the urgency in it, and now you want to step in and figure out, okay, how do I help you still resolve this, but maybe it's not directly by me. Let me know in the comments below if you've been guilted into doing something at work and what that was like for you. What was your experience like? And if you have any questions on how to deal with this particular scenario or any of the scenarios that we're about to talk about, let me know in the comments and I will be sure to respond and try to get back to all of your questions. So the next scenario is unclear communication. Now, this is so important for so many different reasons. I think one of the first things and the most pressing thing is that you want to be able to understand the expectations of you and what your work is being, like whatever work is being assigned to you. You want to be very clear on what's expected. You want to be clear on deadlines. You want to be clear on how to do the work efficiently and what the parameters are for doing that work efficiently. And so if your boss is unclear about this, it can create a complete kind of mess of a situation. I had a boss who made things purposely vague so that way they could always ask people all the different things that he wanted them to do, and they could never really question whether or not it was something that they should be doing or if it was someone else's job, because he made sure that those lines were kind of blurred, and so no one really knew what their expectation was. And what ended up happening was the people that worked really hard and really wanted to make things happen continue to take on more and more and more of that workload because of their own particular work ethic. And then the ones who just, it wasn't made explicitly clear that they should be doing these things, laid back and just let everyone else kind of jump in and do what they needed to do. And it wasn't so much that they were unwilling to work, but they were not self-starters. So if there's unclear communication on the team, you have to realize that that's going to create a situation where some people are going to jump in and try to make things happen, and other people are going to be like, I need direction, like, where do I go with this? What do I do? And so you're gonna have uneven workloads, and that's really, really detrimental to morale. Another thing that I personally experienced was that because the parameters of what needed to happen or the expectation of the outcomes weren't clear, when the project was done and they weren't satisfied, it was everyone else's fault. And so you have to be really careful, because it drives you crazy. It is so difficult to deal with someone who is unwilling to communicate, but so willing to reprimand and like to come down on you and make you feel like crap, right? And it's a difficult thing to deal with, and you go into work not knowing what's what, and you also start to develop this anxiety about making a move, because hey, you make a move and what if it's wrong? What if it's not what they like? What if I get embarrassed? What if they embarrass me in front of the staff? And I don't know that this is something that's necessarily super common, but if you have the kind of boss that doesn't communicate beforehand what the expectations are, but then reprimands you, there are only a few things that you can do. The first thing is you need to ask for clarification. There is no way that knowing how things are going to be, that you are going to avoid having a conversation, which might be difficult in itself, right? They may not feel like they need to guide you, but you have to ask for the guidance. You have to ask for the feedback. You have to ask the difficult questions, because when it's wrong, it's going to blow up in your face, or if it's wrong, it's going to blow up in your face, and then you're going to have to start over, and you're going to be yelled at anyway. So you might as well have the difficult conversation that you need to have beforehand. And if you're lucky enough to not have a boss who thinks it's within their right to raise their voice or have a tantrum or, send out those really passive-aggressive emails, then great, that's amazing if you have someone who's emotionally stable. But if you don't have someone who's emotionally stable, you really need to just bite the bullet, have the conversation, and just know what is expected of you right off the bat so that you're able to do your work efficiently and right the first time. And that leads me into the next scenario, uneven workload. Now, here's the thing. Uneven workload, I think, sometimes happens in pretty much every workplace. There's always people who are really trying, really putting in their all, and other people who try to fly under the radar, who maybe don't contribute as much, who sometimes seem disconnected from the company or the task at hand. And so you're always going to have that. But when it's gotten to the point where the workload you have is leading to you're not completing things on time, your work is just not the quality that it could be, you're not being efficient, you are feeling burnt out, it's time to have a conversation about that. It's time to, say, hey, listen, I have this task that you've asked me to do, and I have this other project that's going on that I think is important for whatever reasons that task is important. And I'm wondering if so can help me. I think the project would benefit from their feedback. So make it about the work. Always make everything about the work. Do not make it about yourself. It's business, not personal. So when you are asking for some accommodations, you're asking them because it benefits the work. Okay, so the next scenario are scare tactics. Scare tactics are basically strategies that are used to scare employees into doing whatever it is that the supervisors or management wants them to do. And I have a story about this. So I was working for someone once that asked one of the team members to call in a bunch of people for interviews. And he was calling people in for interviews for current positions that were staffed. There were no vacant positions. Then he had the person that was in the position currently interview the prospect, right? And the entire point of that was to show the current employees that they could be replaced. Absolutely one of the most cowardly things I have ever seen in terms of management. But at the time, when you're dealing with a young staff who actually believed that this person would follow through with what they were, threatening, I'm gonna say threatening because that's what it was a threat. It was effective at the time, but now in retrospect, with experience in leadership, with experience in other work environments, I realized that the scare tactics try to get you to bend to their will. Now, if you have a boss that's willing to implement these kind of things, I would suggest you start looking for another job immediately. That person is showing huge red flags about who they are and what they're about and what kind of culture and environment they're going to create. In the meantime, until you find a job, if you have to deal with someone like this, the best way and probably the only way to deal with them is to document your work, stand up for yourself when necessary, and ask the questions that need to be asked. There are only a few things that you can really do to kind of cover yourself, and I would say that that's really the point of the game. You need to cover yourself. This is not someone who can be trusted. They are willing to stoop to those kind of levels to try to make something happen, and you don't really want to stick around and find out just how low they're willing to go. Again, you don't need to be passive aggressive about it. You don't need to be so blatant in the fact that you're documenting things. You're still focused on the work and not necessarily how they're making you feel. And if you need to call in HR or any other people, I would really, research your options and exhaust them if you feel that that's what you need to do. Okay, so let's recap some of the strategies that we covered just to make sure that we have it down packed. The first being, you want to be able to say no concisely so that you don't feel like you have to justify the reasons that you're saying no when you're being guilted into something or anything in general. The second thing you want to be able to do is if you can't do something that you're being asked to do, you want to be able to suggest an alternative to get the job done. Third strategy, stand up for yourself when necessary and when appropriate to do so. And lastly, remember that if you are seeing that this is not going to work for you, it is not going to work out for you, and you're dealing with a situation that you know is not sustainable for you in the long run, I suggest you start looking for another job immediately if you think that that's what's best for you. If you liked these tips and strategies, please hit that like button. Don't forget to share. You never know who you might be helping. Hit that bell so you're notified when new videos come out. As always, I am going to put a bunch of helpful links in the description box and anything else that you might need to know. And if you have any questions, again, leave them in the comments and I'll speak to you soon.